Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Thanks for joining us in this episode of LinkedIn Live. I'm extremely happy and delighted for today's episode of Value Stream Management Make IT Flow. Now, before I introduce the guest for today, I would like to understand all of you from where you are dialing in to which part of the world because this is going to be a jam packed session. If you had known about our guest earlier in a lot of conferences, he's got a great ocean of knowledge and he's willing to share it back to the community. And indeed, it's a great privilege to have today Rob Akershoek, Akershoek from DXC Technology. I want to give a little bit of introduction to our guest today before we get into our session. Rob is the senior IT management DevOps architect at DXC and the co-chair of the IT for IT forum within the Open Group. He helps IT organizations to transform to become a lean and agile service provider, ready to manage the new digital ecosystem consisting of hybrid cloud and multi-vendor sourcing landscape. Rob is architecting the new IT organization, combining standards, practices, and concepts such as IT for IT standard, TOGAF, Scaled Agile Framework, Agile Development, Scrum, Site Reliability Engineering, DevOps, Continuous Delivery, and so on. He assists IT organizations in their IT automation journey, covering the entire IT value chain, including portfolio management, the DevOps toolchain, including CI/CD, test management, monitoring and event management, risk and security management, ITSM, CMDB, and so on. Rob Akershoek is author of numerous articles and author of the IT for IT Management Guide. So, with no further ado, let me welcome Rob Akershoek for this session. Thank you so much, Rob, for taking time and being with us today.
Thank you, Suresh, for inviting me. It's always a nice topics to talk about, right? Make IT flow. Yeah, I even do some songs about that, singing.
Exactly, right? So give us a little bit of a background, Rob. What was your uh, reason that you found a passion around IT for IT? Because a lot of people have not known about IT for IT. If you could tell us a little bit of background on why, and you've been involved in the IT for a long period of time now.
Yeah,
So
indeed.
give us a little bit of a perspective of what was the genesis of IT for IT and why is it important?
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Yeah, that's a good question. So I was working for Shell in the IT organization for a long time and within the global IT community there. And I was part of an architecture community. And I was involved in all the different type of IT management related based topics. It's whether it's around service management, the CMDB, monitoring, risk management, security, DevOps, development, testing, everything. So it started with different places like typically service management. I was heavily involved in. Of course, using practices like ITIL, and they were very successful. But then we go into the development space, more continuous delivery, but also portfolio management, security, finance, risk, basically looking at all end-to-end things, all the capabilities you need to run a large IT organization. And then we found that there were some challenges sometimes with connecting the different processes, the tools, and the data together to really create more automated flows, but also support the teams in their journey. And that's where IT for IT came started off with, because we created internally within Shell an IT for IT blueprint, looking at the flows of work in the IT organization, the value streams, the tools, the data, and the teams. And we said, well, there needs to be something in the market for a standard for that. And so we worked with other companies like HP at that time and other organizations to really create an IT for IT reference architecture. So there was really a co-create with a lot of different companies and partners, and that ended up in the open group as the place where now we further collaborate with different organizations to explore this, extend this standard. Yeah. I will cover
Excellent.
this also today as well.
Sure. So today's topic and agenda was to understand seven essential value streams looking at capabilities and building blocks to optimize flow, combining multiple practices. I'm very much keen to that because, in every organization you see, there is a whole lot of frameworks and best practices. Like Paul Wilkinson says, there is a shiny new toy somewhere in this world. So everybody wants to cling on to the new, bandwagon. But how do they all work together in tandem to deliver business value? Because at the end of the day, the business doesn't care about whether it's lean, DevOps, or IT for IT. They want to really see the business value. So a person like you who has done this hands-on experience would be the right person to share us to our community. And I would encourage everybody who has joined us in the LinkedIn live session to post your questions throughout the sessions. We will be taking the questions, make it more interactive as like any other sessions to me, and also share your perspectives because it's kind of the collective wisdom that you're going to gain in the next 45 minutes to an hour. So, and we'll take it from there. So I'll take it. I'll ask Rob to take it forward, and then
Yeah, we can make it interactive, right? So, but as we mentioned in the agenda, we look at value streams, the IT value streams, but also explore a little bit how does that link to business value streams. Look at the capabilities, and as we mentioned, how do you combine different practices? Because in any organization that at least I'm experiencing is they combine different practices. We use, of course, ITIL for the service management practices, and there is DevOps, there is project management methodology still. Now we're looking at scaling agile, or at least looking at how do we, for example, lean portfolio management. How does it bring it all together? And Scrum. But that we know a lot of practices out there are more a longer way to stay, right? But you can combine them very cleverly. So you don't need everything. You just take a few important components like I just mentioned. And that's something I would like to go through with you as well. Now, maybe starting with the value stream. So value streams get a lot of attention nowadays, both on the business side. Think about architects, they think about business value streams, but also in the IT function itself. And I'm not saying IT as a separate organizational entity, but more how you design, develop your digital products and services. There is also a value stream, but then IT value streams. And you see that IT for IT of covers value streams, and I will cover a lot of this today as well. SAFE, Skilled Agile Framework, talks about value streams. And ITIL 4 also talks about starting with the customer journey in mind, looking at the value streams below that, and you can identify different type of IT value streams. And what you see a lot, and I think that's the problem sometimes with DevOps and also the Skilled Agile framework, they look at value streams from a development perspective, actually
right.
creating, delivering new releases. It's about developing and getting a new feature in production. But there's many more value streams. If you think
Correct.
about the operational side, and also what ITIL provides support value streams like, I need to monitor and detect issues and resolve them for a customer. This is also a value stream. Or somebody would like to have access to a business application. So those kind of value streams we need to cater for as well in IT. It's not just about creating new software and deliver that or coding, right?
Well, I think
Um,
I like the birds part. If you go on to the previous one,
yes,
when I was exposed to the IT for IT first time, I was just blown away by this detect to correct because I've actually spent 10 years in operations. So all we used to talk about was incident management and problem.
yeah,
But then looking at detect to correct right from the element of event monitoring, going back to incident problem, and then a whole part of correction looked to be like an opener. I'm just talking about when the IT for IT was first released, right? So
yeah,
it was the first time I heard that time ITIL 4 had not come over. And you're absolutely right. Because a lot of times people look at value streams in the way that they are conducting the work. They
yeah.
don't really look at the other side of the spectrum.
Yeah, I can quickly go through that detect to correct example. Now you mentioned it. It's because it is important. If you think about value streams now, it's not about individual capabilities. Like this is an example of, we want to proactively monitor our services, like user experience monitoring, but also the infrastructure, detect issues and try to remediate that. And if we cannot remediate that, we create an incident, assign it hopefully to the right team. They can fix it, and that's the end-to-end flow. And of course, there are different ways. How do you start this flow? It could also be that that a customer experiences an issue, and then we need to match an incident to something that monitoring already captured. Maybe there's some for the root cause analysis or quickly diagnose incidents, but there are different routes. But indeed, it's really about how do you connect different capabilities together. And this picture try to highlight it a bit complex, but you can imagine it's a complex chain, detect to correct. And if you think about an ITIL, like you have different practices here. We need monitoring practice, availability, service configuration. Of course, you need to understand how applications are linked to business processes, but also how it's linked to infrastructure. So you could do impact assessment. You have your to fix incidents. Sometimes you need to redeploy something. So you need a deployment capability integrated, because if you want to fix something like add capacity, start, stop anything, you need a automation there, and service level management, of course, and a knowledge base. And then you need to think about in a value stream like this, detect to correct. You think about, okay, I have a number of practices, but I also have different tools to support that, various monitoring systems, event management, the CMDB, my IT service management system, and knowledge base, and notification alerting, so I can notify people in the middle of the night. And then you see that the tooling is very complex as well. We got
Yeah.
numerous monitoring systems. How do we alert people in the middle of the night? Oh, we need an on-call schedule. And where do we maintain that? In the service management system. But people have also monitoring tools with their own alerting by email. And then the data, you see, what kind of data do we need? Like we have the logs and monitoring, we got events, we got incidents, config data, stakeholders, because if we want to notify the teams, which team is accountable for which application, and how can we reach them, and knowledge item. And that's where I think it's important to think about value streams. It's not about individual practices, individual tools, the data. It's about the end-to-end flow of work, and how can I continuously evaluate how well am I doing that, and can I improve that. So that's basically the topic for today, and this is just
So,
the example that
so
you
one
just
one
highlighted as an example value stream.
So one question, Rob, is that in based on your experience, do you see organizations building the value stream as a big picture view for everybody in the value chain to understand what the heck am I doing? Because I'm seeing that most of the people don't even have this view when
No,
they
they don't
actually
have,
talk about processes and practices.
they don't have this view typically, and that is the first step always try to come up with, is like, you have an incident management person that defines an incident process. We have maybe the config management team. We have of course, knowledge management and service level management in place. Then we have maybe a team that's with monitoring tools, and the application team of monitoring, the network team is monitoring. So you really need to think about how does it all play together end to end. And so it starts with the end-to-end value stream. Like, how does workflow through the IT function? In this case, how do I detect something and then can be remediate or resolve it? What kind of practices do I need there? What kind of tools? Because a lot of things is supported by the right set of tools. And what you see here is not about a service management system. It's not, that's where the incident is registered, but we have monitoring tools, different ones, the CMDB and deployment and run books for automation, knowledge base, and communication. Nowadays, we want like communicate with our stakeholders, like different teams. We need to diagnose an issue. Then we need to collaborate. It's like a kind of chat ops kind of
Correct.
how do you get teams together and resolve issues? So you need better collaboration and communication components integrated in this whole flow. But you're right, most people or teams, they don't have an end-to-end view. How does this end-to-end value stream looks like in your own organization? And then the second challenge is that we don't have this picture on the wall, let's say. So how can we continuously improve this
Right.
capability? Okay, we want to invest in resolving issues faster, but it means that do I need to update my monitoring system? Do I need a better CMDB? Do I need to make notification alerting better? So where do I invest in to make this better? And then it becomes more complex, because then you need to think about why the CMDB is not up to date, so I don't have context for my monitoring. Events come in, but I have no clue how these servers link to application to a business process. So I need to carefully think about where am I today, where I need to go to, and to mature this end-to-end value stream. And that's basically the topic for today as well. That you need to look at this bigger picture. Um, and this is an IT value stream, but maybe if I go back to the first topic, is it really starts with the value stream from the business, right? Because eventually we need to understand how the customer is, or the business is enabled by IT. And then you have your customer journeys, and the customer journeys is enabled by one or more business value streams. I call it the business value stream. In SAFe, they talk about operational value stream, but it's actually a value stream for the business, or from the business, which contains processes. And actually, these business value streams is enabled by IT. Digital products in IT, for IT we call digital products, and they can be combined in services, and we have different teams responsible for them. Could be development teams, DevOps teams, or op teams. But it really starts with this picture, understanding your digital portfolio, basically portfolio management of products and services, how do you enable the business and your business value stream. And so basically, that's the we already challenge in many organizations. Do I have a good view of my business value streams, my capabilities, and then how these and this is simplified, right? But let's say we have order to pay, order to cash. What kind of systems do I have in place to support these? And then based on that, there we focus on, how does IT as a digital organization develop and design these services to support the business processes? And then we have the IT value streams. But it typically starts, of course, in any organization. How well is my, let's say, marketing to lead or order to cash, hire to retire value stream? What I should improve? Which business application should I improve? But eventually, it all goes through the IT value streams. That's the picture trying to say we have how do we deliver value through an IT perspective, designing, building, testing, and deploying new services and resolve incidents. And and it is basically the focus of today, the IT value streams and business value streams. Of course, we need to tie them together, but we talk about IT value streams here. And yeah, be on the business side, the value streams are basically populated the practices for supply chain management. And in the IT part, of course, we basically we try to power them with ITIL, DevOps practices, IT for IT, and other project management, those kind of practices. And but the challenge that, and I think you alluded to that as well, Suresh, it is becoming more complex. These end-to-end value streams, if you think about the end-to-end chain, is pretty complex. And many organizations don't have this bigger picture. And I think that's where, if you want to improve your IT function, your IT processes, your IT value streams, you need a better understanding of how you actually deliver the value to the customer and understand, for example, where do I maintain these customer journeys from a business perspective in an enterprise architecture system, let's say, and where do I maintain my service and product portfolio? It could be the CMDB, but many organizations have a separate repository, let's say system of record for the applications. Maybe it's part of the EA tooling as well. And there's a lot of challenges there. We have a risk management system as an example for managing the risk assessment. Think about data privacy, risk assessment. Sometimes it's an Excel in many organizations still.
Correct.
We manage the portfolio backlog. We have the team backlog, requirement, design, build, test, deploy, monitor, security, and so on and so on, and CMDB and collaboration. And it is just a simple example. And the reality is it's a little bit more complex. But the message is that, there's nothing in this picture you can eliminate. You cannot say, I don't need code quality. I don't need a portfolio backlog. I don't need an enterprise architecture. I don't need to seem to be. You all need this, but you need to now think about how they're all connected and streamline it. And this is not where we're very good at in IT, right? We just have different teams. Security does the security thing. The architecture have the architecture tool. The risk management team have the risk management tool. The monitoring teams have the monitoring tools. The DevOps teams, the development teams have the development pipeline and tools there. And yeah, and then we have some reporting and shared collaboration tools. But it's a big nightmare in many cases if you
So, in
really.
your opinion, Rob, in this particular complex of the value stream, who has to own this piece? Is it going to be
uh,
the CIO? Who's going to be the belt? I mean, who's ultimately accountable to run through this? Because I know it's kind of the way that you're structured. Because they're siloed teams. They're very focused on the scope of work that they do as part of development, testing, QA, ops team. But to just connect the dots and bring the big picture around it
yeah.
and explain them in the value streams, who do you think is really the key person?
Yeah, and that's a very important question, which organizations have not covered. And that's the first biggest problem I run into when I talk with, let's build this blueprint. And the challenge with DevOps and the different way of working nowadays is becoming bigger, right? Because now you need to think about, hopefully the CIO feels accountable for this end-to-end, let's say, the how IT is enabled by IT for IT. That's the
Correct.
name IT for IT also alluding to. You need IT to run IT. So who owns this portfolio? But it's not about tools. It's really about the practices, the capabilities, let's say. Now, if you think about all these capabilities today, hopefully the CIO would be the owner and say, I'm responsible end to end for all these, how IT can deliver value, end to end flows. But the reality is that in many organizations, there is like a global, let's say, functions organization that maintains the network and infrastructure, workplace service, and each business unit nowadays has their own development and application development, application support. And then you see that they have their own development tools, their own CI/CD pipeline, and we have duplicates. And there's nobody owning the development capability. And sometimes there's maybe somebody, of course, for responsible for, let's say, operations tools like service management system, the risk management, the risk architecture team owns the architecture system. But here we talk about how can we bring it all together, so create owners. Now typically it starts with, and that's where IT tries to help as well, say, can we create value stream owners? So who owns the detect to correct value stream? So we can say this person is responsible for to evaluate how well this value stream works and improve it over time, because it is about continuous improvement eventually. Because if you think about monitoring as an example, 20 years ago I was working in monitoring space as well, but I don't see a lot of improvements. We have still a lot of applications are not monitored. Still, we don't have any clue what's happening out there. And so why did maturity of monitoring not increase? It's partially because monitoring is not a siloed in discipline anymore. It needs to be part of the design and build of your services. You need to think about who's consuming the data. It's not a central monitoring team anymore. It's
Right.
about all the teams that need data. So you need to create a kind of product owner, if you will, for the detect to rec value stream and say, oh, he provides capabilities for monitoring, for service management, for incident and collaboration and so on. And that's challenging. And but it doesn't have to be one person. It's probably more like a
Function.
community of
Correct.
people that work together. So for example, think about this landscape is complex, but who is responsible for the development practices? Who is
Correct.
responsible for service management practices? Who is responsible for the CI/CD pipeline tooling? Who's responsible for risk management? So you can create a community of key stakeholders owning the, let's say, the capabilities, and then looking at the processes and the tools below that and create a kind of, yeah, because nowadays people realize they need to work together to improve the IT value stream. It's not about improving the test management separate or fixing the CMDB or improving monitoring. It's about how do we, you know, combine different practices together to create value and better way of working.
I think
Yeah.
you alluded to a very important point that many of the organizations struggle for resources. If you ask for any resources, that no resources are available. So
Yes.
within the available theory of constraints, you still have to work and build a capability. And I like the way that you say about the people who are having the information readily can make a decision. So leave it to them. Give them the level of authority for them to take a call as a function, as a capability that they will say, this is what we need to achieve. So within the group, a kind of a cohort or a squad that we are talking about, will probably give them an insight and let them deal it on their own, right? So as you start to identify the appropriate value stream owners, a function, a capability, breaking down into part, that will be probably good. But do you also see, Rob, that these capabilities that exist with a value stream owner functions, how do they all roll it up to the big person? So do we have these spokes coming out and then showing up to that big picture? So, okay, what is happening about in the DevOps practices? What's happening around in the service management practice? So how do they all connect to that conduit
Yeah.
as an end-to-end value chain?
Eventually, if you think about, and the word IT operating model is used, is not a really nice word, but you would assume that all stakeholders in IT would like to continuously improve the capabilities, and not just about value creation, reducing risk, managing the costs, optimizing the sustainability and environmental risk associated with IT. So it's a lot, right? It's securing, it's better, fast. So you would assume that we say, let's all work together to create a kind of continuous improvement of all these capabilities, and nothing in IT is standalone anymore, in the sense of, we have our portfolio backlog where we work with different teams what to prioritize. We have development team, monitoring, security. You cannot say that's in isolation. And um, that's where we see a lot of challenges nowadays, that for example, security, and this is the picture showing a bit where, security said, oh yeah, we implement SecOps in tooling like the SIEM, and we're starting monitoring security. That's a good first phase. But then they find out that, yeah, we got a lot of events on servers, could be vulnerabilities, but we don't know which team is accountable for this environment. It's not the infrastructure team, because the application running on the server is responsible team there. But we even don't know which application running on which server and which business process is affected, even if it is a business critical application or not. So eventually you find out that if you really want to improve any function, you need always context. We come back to context being, do I know which application is linked to what business service, and so on and so on. So it creating a common data layer almost within IT is very helpful. That's what my experience at Shell was. Is, yeah, do we talk about the same list of applications, the same type of what an incident, a change, or an epic, or a feature risk, or a risk item? We have the same concepts across the different teams so that we have better insight to improve.
Well, there's some questions coming in, and people who have just logged in, please post from where you are dialing in, so it will help us to assign the whole thing. So, a comment from Raw. Luke is saying, Rob, they were amazing songs. You talked about the song that you created for
Thank you,
IT
Luke.
for IT, so that's great to do for Luke. Then, yeah, there was some mentioning about Shadow IT. The other part was, if a LinkedIn user says, if you leave it to people, it results in silos. So everybody wants to have their own scheme of things to manage and work
Um,
with.
yeah, now, yeah, it sounds like it is actually true. Of course, if you don't create structure, and structure, and then if people are just, they have their own set of ideas, and it could be like every DevOps team does their own tooling for testing, deployment, whatever they like, then you get typically a nightmare. That's, by the way, many organizations are now facing that nightmare, that the DevOps teams, if they have multiple, went different directions. So I know organizations that have over 10 different CI/CD pipeline solutions in place, running there, to be maintained. It's not about how you maintain them, but then how do we get the whole organization to a higher maturity? Because the CI/CD pipeline, you want to integrate that with the service management system for automated change creation, the sub update, the CMDB. Imagine you have 10 of those. You have 5 different backlog tools. You got many different testing tools, and now you're in a level you want to integrate them. It will be challenging. And
Right.
yeah,
And there's one more thing that was questioned, but before that, I think
but we
there's
still
Kadir
need to listen to
Venugopal.
the people, right? Because the people need to be enabled
Yeah,
by
yeah.
these processes and tools. So it's a
let's
kind
let's
of
let's take a few questions from the way that we're seeing. We have Vernon joining us from South Africa. Just please put your names and where do you come. There's a question from Jan Jonker. Hi Rob, would you see a possibility for a joint future between the IT for IT framework owned by the Open Group and the Val IT framework owned by ISACA? Integration would hopefully result in definition, tracking, and realization of business value of investment in IT for IT as well as IT for business.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that would be good to combine. Because eventually, that's a nice thing about COVID, Isaka, is that you think about what are the key strategic drivers and goals for the business, then translate it into the goals and objectives for your IT processes. So, for example, if we say we want to deliver, let's say, faster new features for the business, innovation, then we could say, what kind of things do I need? Maybe I need to streamline my change process, have better agile delivery practices. And how do you translate that into measurable outcome? And I think that that combination with IT for IT and for example, the value IT or COVID framework could absolutely facilitate that. Yeah,
Excellent. Okay.
because eventually business and IT need to be linked much better than we have today. Uh,
And
so that's
sometimes,
the I and I have a slide for that later on. How do you link business and IT together?
but
And
sometimes
and
also one of the questions I get popped up very time when I do my workshops with CXOs. Sometimes IT does not communicate the business language. We talk a
yeah,
lot of terminologies and acronyms, which just throws the people off. So, what would you suggest, Rob? I mean, you've been doing this for quite a number of years. What can IT do to talk the language of the business? We somehow seem to be so much obsessed with frameworks and best practices that we lose the whole insights of why do we exist.
um, yeah. So what I typically do is that and I skipped a few slides, but maybe I should show another slide. It's you need to create a solid common information background, if you will, to IT. So, and let me explain that for a moment. So, in IT for IT, it's called the product, the service backbone, but it's basically a common set of system of record items, if you will. That what customer journeys do we have in the business side, and the business needs to decide those. What business processes I have, what value streams do I have, and how does IT enable that, and which teams are accountable for that. But it starts with this picture of understanding my business processes. And I realize this is a complex picture, but it is an argument picture. It basically shows on the top layer we model the business. So then, and most organizations, they lack the like a vision. These are my business processes that I have organized into value streams, which, let's say, simplify what application to support which business process, where is the application running, what data is in the application, and what technologies does it use, like could be a software components and platforms where it's run on, like Red Hat and Windows SQL database. So, and it starts with the end-to-end stack in mind. That is typically maintained in an enterprise architecture system, right? But we also have a CMDB where we actually have the deployments and the infrastructure associated with that, and then we have our portfolio of products and services. And if you want to, at the foundation for any good organization is have this in place. And you don't need to have everything in place. You could start simple by saying, I need to identify my key processes. I start with a good catalog of my applications and understand which applications link to which business process. So we could start small, and that's what the activities I was also involved at Shell, where we started with the application portfolio management, linking it to business process and linking it to business area. So we start already with a good foundation so that people recognize, and it was shared with business, right? And business should have the same terminology of those kind of functions. Because otherwise it's very difficult to communicate. Imagine didn't have the picture in between, right? The business model. And then we talk about projects and epics. So these are the projects we need to do. And I know hundreds of projects. But if you didn't have the context in the middle, then it's just a list of projects. And that's where we see many organizations are failing in their agile journey. They say we move from project to product
Correct.
thinking. They went from project to epic thinking. So I look at their epics. It's a portfolio backlog. It's all epics store, and I say, where's the product? But it's all epics. You say, well, how do you know this epics impact this application or this service? They didn't. They immediately go to team level. Oh yeah, but then it's the teams. But a team is not the same as a product or an application or a platform. And what they miss is these three type of models: the team model, the business model, and the work model. And that's all mixed up.
Yeah,
So we
exactly.
need.
And I love this one. I love this graphic very well. You just touched a very important point that we focus so much on moving from Scrum to Kanban to scaled agile
Yeah, that's
framework
work
one level, right?
management, right? We changed the
And
way we call something. It's not a project anymore. Now it's an epic. Yeah, that's nice.
right,
We call it an
but
initiative. Yeah,
exactly. But then they haven't really understood and spent time to doing what are we trying to do? What are we trying to accomplish? So trying to relate or connect the dots about from the business unit, what's the respective value stream and how does it map to their pick is a game changer. And
yeah,
I think it seems to be so obvious, but we
yeah,
always say that common sense is highly uncommon, that people
yeah.
don't really have that block in place.
Yeah, the first thing I typically do at organization, and that's even missing in this picture, is looking at the capability model for the business. What does your business capability model look like? Because there I plot the IT products on, or let's say the services. Because if I don't have a reference, a context diagram for the business, it's very difficult to communicate the value of IT. Now, but the business needs to be also interested in the IT part, right? So it can be part of business relationship management. But let's say you have your business contact model. It's not this picture, but you can imagine you have a business capability model, and we can plot key applications on that for supply chain management and for customer service management and so on. And then we can also have the conversation with the business. How well is your supply chain process work? And who are the process owners from the business? And can we demonstrate that these applications actually support your business process? And we can also explain the business, by the way, we need to balance two things. You have new features for the process, but we also have technology platforms below here we need to update, and maybe there are new versions coming, and we can have the conversation with them. So actually this needs running as well, contained updates, and the business has changed, and we combine that. But maybe we could say this application needs to be decommissioned or migrated to the cloud, meaning it has impact on some of the process changes that a business would like to do, and so on and so on. But that conversation is important with business stakeholders and IT together, and they need a common picture to talk about. And I saw somebody saying we need to educate the business as well. Indeed, it's not just saying IT needs to understand the business, because if the business doesn't understand the technologies below that, the application layer, it's still, yeah, for them, I don't understand why it doesn't work like this, right? Because their process is supported by numerous applications, and it could be
Right.
historically the case. But at least we could have the conversation to continuously improve it. Yeah.
So we have some people coming in. So I'm just going to tell you. Some people are saying. Martin is saying hi from Zurich. Thanks, Martin. We have Jay Prakash from JP from Tech Mahindra India joining in. We have Bernardo joining in from Mexico. Thanks, Bernardo. Let's say IT needs to educate the business, as you rightly said, at
Yeah,
least
I
at a
saw
high
that.
level,
Mark, indeed.
in
Yeah.
order to be on the same page. That's absolutely right. Then we have Montreal, where COP 15 on biodiversity starting tomorrow. So Daniel is making a comment there. Yeah, so it's been kind of a conversation that has been really fruitful to do that. So please take us to the next few slides as
Yeah,
well.
the next topic, I think it's about that integrated delivery model, right? So I hopefully we realize that we need many different practices to implement IT value streams and optimize those. But it's now maybe we can come to the conversation. How do you build that, and what
Correct.
kind of things do you need to combine? Now, this picture a bit tries to say we need to focus on the customer and the products, right? The digital products, and have a full digital lifecycle management. But typically, you combine multiple practices. If you think about the full DevOps model, not DevOps in the traditional way, that doesn't have to be one team, but your ops and dev working together. But typically, you have lean practices that people talk about. And here we talk about how can we look at the end-to-end process. So lean is really about looking at the value streams, enabling flow, eliminate waste in those. So that's where you typically need to look at value stream. And this is not about value stream analysis only, like creating those value stream mapping. Value stream mapping is just a method. What's more important is that you manage the value streams. It's not just plotted once in a nice diagram, but it's really about managing the value stream, who owns it, what capability we improve. So continuously doing that. That's very important. Agile practices, of course, in the sense that, yeah, we want to create more continuous feedback loops, smaller iterations and learnings, visualize the work, those kind of things. So IT for IT is using that, but other practices as well. DevOps, of course, about not necessarily the traditional current DevOps practices in the sense put everything in one team, because I don't believe that is always a good solution. But it's about how do you collaborate with different teams, the dev and ops. It could also be an application DevOps team and an infrastructure platform DevOps team, because they need to work together.
Right.
And we need to realize that not everything is in a single DevOps teams anymore. It's not possible because, take a simple organization with has 200 applications. An organization that has 200 applications typically has similarly 100 IT specialists. It's impossible to have DevOps teams for 200 applications, right? The scaling is possible. If you look at Shell, they had 6,000 applications and about 15,000 IT people. But you cannot say that you create teams around applications because you have more applications. But
Correct.
some applications are in maintenance mode, so you don't have a DevOps teams, right? So that's kind of construct you need to think about. And IT service management, of course, because you need to look at the full life cycle of your services. You design the services, you look at the value, the risk, and cost, and you can apply ITIL practices here as well. And so basically combining this together in the different ways together. And that's why hopefully I'm going to show you a bit how can we combine practices together, but thinking about an integrated delivery model. And I simplify things a bit here, right? So we need to think about you develop something, you go ops, and you have continuous feedback loop, and you try to learn. So it's still simplified. But typically in IT, and that's where we move into what kind of value streams do we have in IT? And I slowly build it up a bit. But typically you have different flows of work. We talk about detect to correct on the right side. That's typically about there is an issue, we need to fix things. But we also have service requests, like request to fulfill is an activity, you could say, where people, I want to order something, I want to have access to a business application. This is a completely different flow of work. DevOps teams typically forget that we once something is operational to get value out your investment. Yeah, it's nice that people at least have access to it and that you can effectively source those resources, but also add and remove capacity. Maybe you need to do some patch management there, right? Everything that is standardized can be deployed. And to the left side is everything that is changed, right? We need to have a new feature for an existing application. It's about develop, enhance something or fix something. But on the portfolio level, that's basically strategy to portfolio is about how do I optimize the portfolio as a whole? Because it's nice I have 200 applications that I continuously enhance, but I don't have the money to do that. I don't even have the resources to do that. So I need to prioritize the work across those 200 applications. I need to look at maybe I can rationalize, simplify, move something to the cloud, merge them together, migrate to SaaS, all those things. That's on the portfolio level, which is a different flow of work because here it's about also continuous, about evaluate your current portfolio, assess how well my applications support my business, let's say customer journey, and come up with improvement opportunities and then plan that. So that cycle of strategy to portfolio, that's important. Now, and then you suddenly see they have different value streams in IT. It's not about the DevOps value stream or a development value stream anymore. There's many more. And I will show you there a little bit more than this. But the idea is that every organization creates a kind of digital management canvas. And this is a simplified IT for IT picture, but it is about what kind of key building blocks do I need in my digital organization or any IT organization. So again, we have on the left side more on the portfolio management, the development and ops side, and then you have some supporting area capabilities like we need to understand the costs of IT, the risks, maybe the skills and competences, resources, and so on. And then you can slowly build, and I think any organization should have this, is do I have a capability model for the IT function? So what kind of components do I have? Now think about strategy nowadays, and this is simplified, but I need to maintain my strategic drivers. Where do I want to invest in? What is important? And then I maintain a portfolio backlog. A few years ago, we would call this a portfolio, project portfolio, and the PMO would manage this. But now it's different. Now we don't have a central PMO. Typically, it's business unit have their own portfolio backlogs, and maybe it's still project based. Doesn't matter. And this is not owned by IT per se. This is business and IT together, right? The
Right.
IT has their portfolios and the business has portfolio changes, but it needs to be linked together. And then this is the most important aspect. It's like the linking them together. So in this picture, this is so important, and I need to highlight that. So on the top, you have your project, let's say your portfolio backlog. Nowadays, it's an epic, but let's call it the project. The project impacts something on my application portfolio that you see on the bottom. Like what applications do I have? Is it a new application? Is it an enhancement? Now, this link is often missing as we talked about it. We don't have traceability of what epic touches what application because applications, as I mentioned, we have 200 applications. So how do you even link a project or an epic to 200 applications?
Correct.
My agile backlog, they're not even application aware. They're not asset aware. They only talk about epics, features, stories, and agile backlog tools nowadays still talk about projects. Weirdly enough, the base construct is still a project. But if you tie these together, you get amazing results. And that's, for example, I did at Shell. We linked project to applications, and that was extremely insight that we got out of that. We know, okay, we miss investment to application that should be retired. We invest in products and services that we are targeted for decommissioning. Do we spend right? Does it link to the architecture roadmap? And does the architecture, the roadmap for the applications, right, link into strategy? So it's linking strategy to your whole portfolio of change and portfolio backlog. Now, I can assure you that most organizations have really big troubles getting this right. And that's why it's so important to start building this picture. How do you manage your demands today, your project? Is it linked to your architecture and application portfolio or not? And then, of course, we move into the next phase. And here we actually do the development. And here you have the product and team backlogs, typically, like in a Jira or an Azure DevOps. They're starting to design things, configure, have the pipeline and test. And you have here your continuous integration, continuous delivery. And of course, once you're starting to deploy something, hopefully you can automatically raise a change. And now here you see change is different than in the past, right? Change management is changed as well. In the change from an application perspective is typically done here, right? The portfolio backlog and the project, that's changed. What needs to be changed? Why does something need to be changed? But we also have change still in the operation side in the sense that I want every change in the operation to be registered, that have traceability, what version has been deployed, and then we can trace back why is it changed, what value did it bring, but it could be an issue. And so there's a link between change and deploy. And then, of course, when I deploy something, there is a good practice to update the CMDB automatically based on deployment and not discovery. Discovery is a nice fix, but it's not solving your problem You need to have the right tagging, and nowadays we call thing tagging, but you tag it with the right application ID, so you know which resource belong to which application, and we start monitoring. And I can continue with that. You build your event management, and then we incident problem. You have your feedback loop, and of course, as I mentioned, you still have consumption management in the sense we have a catalog and request and identity and access management. Now you can see the picture building up. But these are the kind of picture that any organization should start to build and say, okay, what do I have in place for this? What practices do I use? What tools? How do I integrate these? Because they're different. And I'll show you later how that can be integrated. But typically, if you want to build this integrated picture, and it's still simplified, you use different practices, right? So we have like ITIL we use for service management practices. And nowadays ITIL 4 is much broader than I highlight here, of course. It covers almost everything we on the picture, but typically it's used on the ops side and instant problem change, requests, and service level management config. But we still have on the development side other practices like Scrum, DevOps practices, project management, Prince2, Toga from an architecture perspective, Safe. We see a lot of organizations moving into Safe. To be honest, I don't believe that you should implement Safe completely. It's maybe think about portfolio level changes, right? But still, it's good to think about scaling agile, using ITIL, using Prince, because you still have projects. Even organizations that move completely to agile way of working, they realize, well, we still have projects somehow and programs,
Correct.
because sometimes we don't have dedicated resources for every application. So because that's not feasible, it's not economical viable. So then I need to form a short, allocate resource to a team that they, and we still have a product owner, right? But the product owner gets resources through budget, and it's typically the project construct you use for that to get, additional resources for your work.
So I like this one, and I wanted to kind of spend a couple of minutes here. Is that if you look at this one, Rob, I see a lot of times people are going and asking for a training or a workshop or a certification. They have a lot of certificates on the part, but the part of the problem is they don't understand that these is part of a capability building exercise, and they need to
Yeah,
allocate. Okay, this is a part of your strategy to portfolio capability. That's why you need to do business relationship management. You like the word that you put on the FinOps part, because people said that, oh, moving to a cloud means that we'll become, the cost and the scale will be absolutely great. But then after so many years, they say, oh no, we are making more, we are losing a lot more money. So, you put a kind of control and come back and say that we need to now start focusing on FinOps. So I
yeah,
like the way that these capabilities, that when organizations start to implement some of those best practices, ask the question, where does it fit into the overall digital operating model,
yeah.
and what does it take for us to do it? Because once you see this as a big picture, and these are the tenets that is going to help us to build that business capability model, this is where IT will look good. That's a much different proposition altogether. But I
Yeah,
had
it's
one
better.
question.
Yeah, it's a good topic, Suresh. It's more about I want to improve this value stream. Let's say strategy to portfolio or the evaluate. You want to now in IT for IT 3.0 is changed. We have the evaluate value stream, but it's really about how do I improve those end-to-end value streams. Let's say how do I know where to invest in, and I can use practices like lean portfolio management for that. So I can use that. But for development, we still have Scrum and some other continuous delivery practices. So, but I'm using it for improve my value streams, not to implement a practice.
Sure.
And of course, for security, we apply NIST. But the nice thing about it's about integrating these practices. So you mentioned FinOps, but FinOps is nice, but FinOps needs to be integrated in the sense that it's only looking at the cost from your cloud. You need a good CMDB for that. You need tagging
Correct.
policy. How do you even have it? You need a good application portfolio environment to do that. If you don't have that, your FinOps initiative will fail the same as
Correct.
other initiatives have failed. So, and now you look at the connectivity between the dependencies to make something a success. It's still good to train people, but for example, safe. Yeah, I did the safe training to because I want to know what it is, and now I have a lot of customers. I use safe, but on the other hand, safe is not a DevOps framework. It's a scaling development framework, and people say, oh, this is we use safe, and it's no, it's not covering ops at all. It doesn't talk about request
Correct.
cost architecture, not very well. It doesn't talk about a catalog of self-service and incident management, configuration management, not even mentioned there. And so you need to think about, you know, we want to improve our IT function. So you need to sometimes combine things together.
Absolutely.
and leverage the parts of it. Like nowadays, people talk about site reliability engineering. But if I have to be honest, it's not a foundational practice. It's not. So if you really think about what is the foundation for my IT organization, I hope that people realize IT for IT is a sort of blueprint. But then you have ITIL, your project management, DevOps, and Scrum. That's your foundation. TOGA for architecture. But these are, let's say, function specific. Okay, for architecture, I use TOGAF, but that's typically not for the people that operate. The developers, they don't need TOGAF training. It's
Correct.
nice that they know about it, but they learn about it when we talk to them. I hopefully that every person in IT, that's my goal, every person in IT understands how this whole end-to-end workflow works. So they know, oh yeah, TOGAF, I heard about it, it sits there. And this is how it applied to me because I need to create a solution intent for my application. Oh yeah, that links into domain architecture. They need to know.
Correct.
So there's a kind of, um, when during my study, I was studying business administration and IT, and I was also studying for a year in Los Angeles, and I did some courses on video and TV making programs. So it was like it was nice as a sort of additional course.
Correct.
And what we did there, you as a student, you were put a place in the studio, and in one afternoon you have to create record a whole like a video, a music video, and you have different roles that needs to exactly understand other roles. So you're not an artist. If you're working on the camera, you're not responsible for the sound. Somebody else is looking at, let's say, the subtitles or whatever. There's all different roles. But if somebody makes a mistake, it falls over. But
Correct.
they so and you need to know exactly what the other parts are doing, and then you can work as a chain. Because
Correct.
there's one option to put everything in one team. That's what the DevOps approach. Put everything in a multidisciplinary team, and they fix it. On the other hand, we have to be realistic. We cannot afford we don't have all T-shaped people. We
Right.
don't have all the best people in the world because we are already difficult to get the right people. So if we can see how we can work better together, we don't need everything in one team. We can
Right.
work better, more effectively because we know how we depend on each other. And it's
Right.
also an economic reason why you cannot always have those. We don't always have the best product owners, the best people, unless you're maybe a really software engineering company. You might have the
Right.
best, right? But we typically need to cater for a multi-hybrid model, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So last 9 minutes. So I'll ask
Oh
people
yes,
to ask questions if you have for Rob. And I think Rob, this has been a very enlightening presentation around that. We'll talk about this one in a little bit. But if
sure.
you have any questions, team, please post it on the chat window. We will be taking it out as we speak. There's also a few people join. Rienhard from Vienna, Austria. Thanks, Rian. So we have people, but yeah, let's try to find out what does that the future look like, and why is IT for IT going to be an important area to think about?
Yeah, so IT for IT can be used as the bigger picture, right? And I'm not saying you should adopt IT for IT as a whole, but it's more about, you need to think about the integrated delivery model. And this picture was more about what kind of things do we see in the market happening.
Sure.
And we talk about lean portfolio management more on the strategy and planning sides and looking at portfolios. Uh, think about goals and objectives. So object key results, right? That's typically an area. How do we translate strategy into measurable goals? Manage the portfolio. We see topology. How do I organize my teams around the value streams, my business capabilities, or the products and platform teams? So that's a key topic I see many organizations are looking into. Uh, Value stream management. That's also a topic. Now, value stream management. What I mean here is how do I get traceability what's happening in my value stream? And typically it starts that it's not really good depicted here, but it starts typically at the DevOps or the development value stream, right? The
Right.
requirement to deploy to get traceability from an idea to production. But I think value stream management by a concept is very important that you look at how can I get more traceability of what's happening in my IT organization so I can continuously improve that. Yeah, other practices I think you see nowadays is secure and privacy by design, of course, and yeah, on the operational side, AI ops monitoring, right, is very important nowadays. Observability, and we're always good at creating a new name of something, and then suddenly the whole world is different, and we have the same tools almost, right? But observability, the nice topic is about how can I make my get an insight in get systems observable is already a challenge for many organizations. So if you design them a way that you can monitor them, And traces is an example of that. That if I can track a business process across different applications, that transaction monitoring, that's interesting. It's called the tracing nowadays, and but that's not new, right? 20 years ago we called it business process monitoring. But those kind of things, how can we now get that really implemented in the right way? So don't start with big initiative for observability. I would say is what it starts small in this example, right? How can I, for one application or business process, get traceability?
Correct.
The same with user experience monitoring, those kind of topics, or cybersecurity. Yeah, XLAs nowadays is of topics that people talk
Yeah.
about. How do you get experience level agreements? But for example, in the site reliability engineering, people still talk about service level, clear, measurable service level objectives. But it's not. But they measure differently. So this is about experience from the user, right? But you also have traditional SLO metrics, but then more on the application side, like how many transactions were successful, or
Correct.
yeah, or how for X% of the transactions are failing. Those kind of measures. Instead of availability, you say I want in 89.x% of my transactions pre-processed, orders processed correctly on time within. That's an interesting metrics, right?
Yeah.
But
Great.
yeah,
So I
there's a
think
lot of
we've got
things we can
5 minutes
talk about.
part of things. So there was a couple of questions here. So we'll
Yes.
talk about that. So that could be a good thing. So I'll probably so there's a huge gap in orchestration to provide value. There's a question to Rajesh from Rajeshwari T. Where to start and where to end?
Yeah.
Uh, that's becoming a big problem these days. So where do you see Rob to start and end?
Yeah, but actually that's not that difficult, right? But and you see the ITIL practices also talk about like start where you are. But but what I think a good start would be is to look at your current, let's say, let's take the IT for IT as an example. This is your capabilities you need, and just as where are you today in the journey? For very simple, start with the bigger picture, and work with a different team. So basically, what you should do, maybe next week or now, maybe beginning next year, say, I would like to create this picture of how do we run IT today with the different stakeholders. So security, risk, architecture, development, and ops, and maybe monitoring team, whatever. And have those people together say, how do you operate IT today? What processes do we have? There's one. Do we even have an integrated process picture? What kind of tools do we have in place? Who owns what? And then we can build a bigger picture of how everything is working today. Very still high level, right? Simple capabilities, processes, the tool owners. And then we could say, okay, let's investigate in more detail what kind of initiatives do we have in place today on those. So this is almost this picture that I show here. You have a capability map, and you say you start with the current picture of who owns what and what's happening there. What tools do we have in place for monitoring, for example, for security? And then you do another step. Two would be what kind of initiatives are there in flight or planned on this. So what people are working on, and then you can plot to this. Oh, do we have a monitoring initiative? We have an initiative for a CI/CD pipeline. And then you start building a portfolio of all the things people are doing to improve IT, and build a portfolio board, and hopefully create a architecture like in the business side. It would be nice if you start with the business value streams. Now
Sure.
we do the same for IT. You start with the IT value streams. How do we enable those IT value streams?
Correct.
And that's where good starts. Start with a bigger picture, but still small, manageable. And then you get a conversation very easily. Say, oh, I didn't know I had so many tools for IT. I didn't know that we had so many initiatives, or what are we even doing, and why don't we still have so many different backlog tools of different ways of working? Should we standardize?
Yeah. So
And
one question from Frank Phillips from the Netherlands. How do you incorporate the right capability and required behavior employees need to have to adopt and utilize this approach?
yeah, now one thing is of course that we need to create. Yeah, it's little bit weird to say that, but like create a kind of integrated view on IT from a purpose perspective. We are here to help the business, and this is the purpose we are in, right? So this is the purpose. Now, hopefully everybody agrees that, but linking it to the business. What are the business challenges we face today? And can we link to that? For example, if you're a telco, you want to improve the customer experience there. So you have those kind of link, and then we say, what do we need to do as IT better in that? And then people realize, oh, basically what we need to is improve our IT management capability, and get those people that feel accountable for the different areas. could be security, could be development, testing. Put them say you are responsible now to make the end-to-end work to help the business. Can we work together to build a kind of a yeah, collaborative teams to look at the current state and monitor improvements and improve. So it's kind of continuous improvement cycle and get teams motivated or people responsible for these practices to improve it. So um, but you still need somebody maybe to say, this is a priority because everybody's very busy. And so it works best, I must say, to Frank, if there's a big business driver. Yeah, like okay, we need reduce costs. We are then we now forced to improve ourselves. So it would be nice if you can link it to a strategic thing that's happening. It could be like we want to move to the cloud, for example. It could be the big business initiative, and then we move to the cloud and say, okay, then we're going to fix this for the new cloud. We're going to make it wonderful. We're going to, from day one, the CMDB is up to date. We have a good tagging strategy. Make it good at day one. Don't get technology debt from day one.
Sure. Great conversation, Rob. We are on the last. We've almost exceeded with that 1 hour of things. So great conversations, great
Yeah,
things.
thank you,
So
Luke.
measure from Luke saying that it's been a pleasure to listen to Rob. Thank you so much.
Nice to see you
Thank
again,
you
Luke.
so much, everyone, for joining us in this episode of LinkedIn Live. I hope you found that useful. Rob, this was a great content. I said it was a power pack session for a lot of conversations to do that. And there was a part about please let us know your take on the integration of various framework and standards, something too similar to APIs, for example. So we'll probably take it as it comes in because you're on the top of the hour. But keep your questions coming, and we will also see if there is anything to do. And we are talking about Rob for a while that we might want to do a detailed, deep, conversation later when we come over that. So a lot of praise coming from Frank. Thanks, Rob. Great talk. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
everyone. So we thank you everyone for your time, and this is great. So it's been an absolute pleasure to have you here, Rob, and we hope to see all of you in our next LinkedIn episode, which is going to be on the 15th, where we're going to talk about all about your career questions, because everybody is wanting to know what is my career looking like. So I'm looking to see you all in our next LinkedIn Live on 15th December. So wish you all a happy holidays and safe season, and Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year. Thank you so much.
Thank you as well. And thank you for the people joining this session. And I hope they have indeed good holidays and good next year.
Thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much,
Have a nice day.
Daniel. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day.